Thank you very much for, first of all, coming to see Albatross, and secondly, sticking around for this talk back on the power of theatre for social change. I think first and foremost, another round of applause for Loussin and Isley for that amazing work. And then just to say a really quick thing about Represent. We are a company for actors from a lower income background. Our mission is to diversify the socioeconomic imbalance in the arts that's growing and growing and growing, particularly mid-pandemic. It's getting just worse and worse, so that's why we are here. I wanted to go to Isley, first of all. So the playwright Terence McNally said that theatre changes the heart, then it changes the mind, and that makes people get off their asses and do something. Isley, could you tell us a little bit about why you decided to write Albatross?
I mean, first of all, what a quote. Like,
it's good,
what
right?
A great quote. Yeah, I wanted that was the idea. But seriously, though, there are so many plays, there are so many good plays. Like, why write another fucking play? Like, why would you do it? And I mean, I think part of the reason I'm talking in this talkback is because I really believe strongly in the power of theatre for social change, in the way that I believe in anything you do in life, you can purpose it in that direction, and you sort of should be. Like, if I'm a playwright, why would I write a play if not to try and change the world? If I ran a cafe, I'd probably run a cafe to try and change the world as well, even if it's just like changing people's weekends or changing people's interaction with their food or relationship with the local economy or whatever it was. The point is, though, I'm good at writing plays, so...
Sounds like you want to do a cafe.
I mean, I think that's just the Fleabag effect. Oh God, I'd be so terrible at running a cafe. My brother runs a cafe, or used to run a cafe with his partner, and it was so much hard work. Writing is so easy. Anyway, the point is, I wanted to write a play that was about issues I cared about, but acknowledging that I didn't have any direct experience of, for example, homelessness. And so the play that I could write was about community and societies and individuals' relationship to that issue, which is how I think this collection of characters sprung up, and all of them are dealing with situations or issues of choice, consequence, and privilege, which I think is a way that we can all, anyone at any sort of strata of society, can find a way into those issues. And I didn't want to write a protagonist-led play. If you buy the play text, I say in the beginning, every time I tried to write a play with one person leading it, I found that the audience had this get out clause of like, oh, well, that wouldn't happen to me, that's not my life, that's not my world, blah, blah, blah. But a communally told story about a group of people who sort of occupy various places in relation to each other didn't give the audience that out, didn't give someone the opportunity to distance themselves, and actually brought a viewer, I hope, closer than they thought they were to these issues. Does that answer your question?
I think it does.
Okay.
Very well.
That's very kind of you, thank you.
I'd like to just follow up with you mentioning how writing about homelessness as someone who hadn't experienced it, as a playwright, how did you go about that? Obviously there's a massive question now about how we, art and artists and those things. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that?
Yeah, so I can talk about this with some clarity because I end up talking about it a lot. In like workshops, I do sort of workshops on autobiographical writing, which again, like I said, this is not. Although the story that you tell about the parents getting together is just 100% true story of my parents getting together. So you're always drawing on life, you're always looking for like empathetic avenues into the story you're telling. But basically, if you don't have that unique access, you have to give yourself unique access, you have to embed yourself in your story. And what I find is that when you do that with genuine openness, people who do have experience of the story that you're telling want to help you tell it. They want you to do a good job. They want you to represent them accurately and with generosity. And they're ready. I wrote a play called Tether, which is about a blind marathon runner and her guide. I'm not visually impaired, and I don't even run for the bus. But I tweeted Paralympics GB and said, is there anyone you can put me in touch with to talk to about, so that I can do a good job of this? And they were like, yeah, and I was talking to gold medalist Paralympians who basically said to me, the Olympians get all the attention and we don't, and so we really want to talk to you. A lot of them were in Australia, so I was there at midnight, they were there at lunch. We were having conversations via Skype at the time. People want you to do a good job. If you have I've talked for a really long time and I feel like I'm repeating myself.
No.
I'm also slightly distracted because my little dog is here, and I think he wants to like roam around and make friends. If there's anyone who doesn't want that to happen, just tell him no. He knows no. And
For those viewers at home, do you want to describe Joey should make an appearance. Joey could be on your lap, Isley.
Joey's been key in our process.
This is Joey. He's a little white alien dog. Good job. Okay, I'll give it.
Thank you, Isley. So, on that note, talking about like embedding yourself in this story, in this major issue, I'd like to turn to you, Loussin-Torah. Loussin-Torah played Warren and Sonny. Quite a few lines that you had. Amazing work. Loussin-Torah, could you tell us a bit about the process for you, how it was rehearsing Albatross and getting into the mindset of those two very different characters?
Gosh, it was such a big process, and also such an honour to have you in the room with us. I think that was definitely key. Having the playwright in the room, which from what I heard from you, is not something that happens often. You don't get to always have the writer in the room. So it was a real, when I say honour as well, all of us felt like we wanted to do justice to these characters, their situations, and ensure that we gave as much empathy and authenticity to these really, really difficult stories that deal with very harrowing themes. And yeah, like the process was amazing. I think we were just gifted with Isley and gifted with Jess Edwards as well, who directed Albatross. So that was the first thing for all of us, I feel like, across the board, was authenticity. Wanting to tell an authentic story and do justice to the writing and to the characters. Research-wise, I think sometimes as an actor, especially with TV being, film and TV being so huge and so widely accessed, and what you said about unique access, giving yourself unique access, there was a feeling amongst a few of us like, oh, do we need to kind of get method with this? Do we need to go out onto the streets and do certain kinds of research? Do we need to put ourselves in certain situations? And you hear of actors doing method acting, or what's called the method, which would be going out and putting yourself directly in a situation, but also what a privilege that it's a choice for us to be able to go and do that. As Warren says, you can afford to do that. So that played on our minds, but I feel like our unique access was largely Isley and in actually just your presence, your insight, and having the freedom that Jess Edwards, our director, provided to, really consider what's this character's background, where have they come from previously, how do they walk, how do they talk, how do they move in space, how do they interact with other people. If you're somebody that is seen in society as this group of a person, how does that stand in relation to someone that's seen with a bit more power, with authority? And when we kind of went into embodying that, I think that definitely helped to shape, for me, the difference between Warren, who's employed, who had a long-term relationship, who has security, who is sort of safe in the world, and Sunny, whose situation is unsafe, whose situation is unstable. Something she said, they say often, something could happen, some disaster will happen to me, and maybe that will happen, and so now I want to give my organs away. I want to do something meaningful. I want to create a space for myself in the world that gives me meaning, because I feel like Sunny didn't necessarily have that. So we had quite a wonderful opportunity to build our characters. We created mood boards, playlists. Some of us went into music, really just to find the energy of how this person behaves in the presence of other people, and how they interact when it comes to the power structures. So, does that answer the question?
Beautifully. Loussin-Torah is not just a performer. Loussin-Torah is also a spoken word artist, curator of work. One of those things I'd like to ask you about is specifically Speakeasy. And on this topic of like the power of theatre for social change, can you tell us about Speakeasy and how it relates, what the effects are of Speakeasy for us participants in terms of affecting them socially?
Yeah, okay, so Speakeasy is something that I actually started in response to the pandemic. So when everybody was locked down and Represent had to pause. We were 8 rehearsals in! We were making groundbreaking theatre! And all of a sudden, all of this excitement that we had for finally, as working class people, doing the thing that we love doing the most and being paid for it, having a professional opportunity to showcase the thing that we love and the thing we've worked for most of our lives, that paused, and I found myself in a place of actually, like Sunny, what's the meaning of my life? And I think a lot of creatives, a lot of artists kind of end up in that situation. Why am I here? What am I doing? If it's not to change somebody's mind about something, what am I doing? So that was a really big thing for me, and I think sort of some of my where I struggle in life is when I don't feel like I have a purpose and have something to offer, have something to give. So I was at a point with Represent. You provided as much support as you could, and workshops, which were amazing, writing workshops and such, and we did an R&D online, and we just had to sort of all of a sudden learn how to do all of this stuff online. And in the beginning, it was dressing gowns, cup of tea. Remember when you told us to stop yawning?
Oh no,
Stop yawning
did
on
I?
screen when you did.
Oh no, that's so bad.
But no, it's
Stop
good.
yawning. What a dictator.
But we had to learn a new discipline of how do I still get meaning across? How do I show that I'm present? How do I show that I'm listening to the person opposite when I could just camera off and you have no idea what I'm doing? So presence, listening, really, really learning to sort of be in the room even though it feels like we're so far apart. That was a challenge. So you provided as much support as you could, and then at one point, the pandemic affected all of us in the way that it did, and we were left. And for me, I didn't have other work. I also was waiting on Represent, so I didn't want to find something that might bind me in a new thing that might be a certain amount of money that I wouldn't be able to sort of let go of. So I actually had some support in finding work, and this work coach that I had through Twining Enterprise, which they provide mental health support, they provide work support for people struggling with their mental health. Twining Enterprise, the work coach that I had said, and a few people said to me, I just worry that you're going to fall into something where you're not using the skills that you've already got. And at the time I'm thinking, well, what skills? You come out of uni, that thing that you studied, philosophy, acting.
Sorry to interrupt you. What skills? Like, what? Ridiculous. But carry on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay, but society doesn't see, or my experience of society, whatever that is, that society doesn't see the arts and creative work as useful, as productive, as something that can do something for people. You know, go out and get a real job. There's all of these things here that you hear as you grow up. So I felt like I don't really have useful skills. And then people said, I worry you're not using the skills that you do have. And it took a long time to be like, oh, hold on a second. I'm an actor, I'm a spoken word artist, and this is something that does make people feel something, and the feedback that I've been given, it inspires people. And then I thought I could teach people what I know. But also, as an actor, you don't want to become a teacher. That's kind of another thing. You can, oh no, that's the secondary, the fallback option, which many people do, and it's fine. But so I founded Speakeasy, which was, I just started doing online workshops, teaching people poetry and how to come from their own expression. What do you want to say? Why do you want to say it? But using the acting, what's your intention? When you step on stage, when you address an audience, what is your intention behind the words, and why is this story important? Why is it going to affect you? And I sort of married the two things that I had been working on, and that was wonderful. I can't remember your question.
Well, it was kind of like how Speakeasy, its effect on the participants involved.
Yes, so I found that people had so much that they wanted to say, especially during a time of isolation. People had a lot that they were feeling, that they, you don't want to bring other people down. You don't necessarily want to have the same conversation about the same situation over and over again. I remember a point where having phone calls was just miserable. It's just like, I don't want to pick up the phone because I know what you're going to say, and we might have different opinions. I don't want to clash with you, but so much was going on in the world. But people have a lot that they need to express, and creating that safe space. So I feel like participants found a safe space where they could just explore what was actually, through writing down what was going on inside. I teach by free writing and then sharing. And it was amazing to, even online, to have people sharing deep stuff, whether it was mental health, whether it was physically stopped, and this sort of time of isolation was really hard, and I watched people go from sort of wanting to say it all to becoming artists, to becoming, when I gave people challenges with intention, got actors in the space, people were singing over Zoom, and it's kind of absurd, but also magical, because then when I met people in person for the first time again, it was just like, I've seen your journey from kind of difficulty with confidence and how to present yourself to a full-blown actor, performer, but also just a really confident person.
That's really lovely to hear. And on that thing of empowering people, I'm really grateful to Chris Sonnex, who is the artistic director of Cardboard Citizens and formerly artistic director of the Bunker Theatre. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about your work with Cardboard Citizens, what the company's ethos is, and your role as artistic director in that?
Yeah, I've been there 8 weeks. So,
Wing it.
tell me.
We'll believe
So
anything you say.
it's an organisation that gets hip hop artists to rap against each other, and I just watch it. that's what happened. No, Cardboard Citizens is a theatre organisation that was set up in 1990 to create work with and about homelessness. It's sort of changed over the years. It's sort of become about homelessness and lived experience, and with or without homelessness. So it kind of opens up a whole entirety of people. It's historically used an ideology from Augusto Boal, which is Theatre of the Oppressed, and Forum Theatre, which is sort of like it's just a lot of academia Like, it's academic, and I don't want to bore you with it because it's boring sometimes. That's okay. I've made loads of enemies in the world of theatre, of the oppressed and forum theatre right now because it's being live streamed. But, you know, the thing is the difference between something that's forum theatre. The ideology is that forum theatre will change the world, and sometimes I think that maybe what does that mean that this doesn't change the world? Do you know? Like, it's not forum theatre.
What is forum theatre?
I could explain it to you, but we'd be here for like 20 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, but fundamentally, what it is activating the audience to change stuff. So you give them, you give people the opportunity to see a story, and then the audience can then change that story through conversations and all that stuff. So it's a lovely ideology. But whether it works or whether it's in the same, they're two different pieces of information, and it can work. The world can work. God, I am digging myself a hole.
Not at all.
Big conversation. I've been there 8 weeks, you know what I mean? Like in 2 months, I'm like, yeah, fear of the oppressed. It's the best thing ever. What are you talking about? In that place in Latimer Road. Like, what? No.
Spectators, right? Rather than spectators.
Yeah. There you go. Look, someone's.
Who's read it?
No, I teach it
You've
to
read it.
GCSE students. Augusto Boal, this is actually being recorded. But we'll go on our YouTube channel for students as part of our outreach work. So, no, it's good. It's good. But this is part of that.
I've never heard the word forum theatre until now, so thank you.
Well, there you go. They're amazing. So I'm shaking the board.
Spectacular.
Yeah, no, listen. It's a thing that's rooted in good intentions and as with anything, I mean, I think with any art form, I'm not particularly au fait with like musical theatre, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to watch something that's musical theatre and not like it, or I might not like loads of things. We all might not like loads of different things, and that's like legitimately okay. The point is that we're engaging in something, or we have the option of being able to engage in those things. You know, true. Like we talk a lot about representation and diversity in the arts industry. And a lot of that is kind of hierarchical. It's like, you must come and see this show. But actually, the real revolution is saying, you can come and see this show. Here's an opportunity to come and see this show, rather than feeling like you can't actually access it. And the real beauty is just saying, no, I don't want to. Do I want to spend my life watching theatre every night? Probably not.
So, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about really actively in the last half a year because of a different project I'm doing. But I think that part of the beauty, and also maybe the reason that it's not done so much anymore, at least in this country, of forum theatre, is that I think sometimes audiences come to the theatre and they see a play about issues and they think that that is their job, like they have done their job because they have bought the ticket and they have sat for the 90 minutes, whereas forum theatre turns it on its head. In theory. And you can still be like, oh, I gave a suggestion, I've done my job, I don't have to do anything past these doors, but at least at the heart of forum theatre, there is a sort of contract of sorts. You know that you're going to be asked to participate or contribute, and that also the whole fucking point is to bring it outside of the doors, outside of the stage, to the spectators, to the outside of the theatre, to the world. So at least it has that at its heart.
Yeah, at its heart. Yeah.
You can't leave that bit out.
We should stop talking about forum theatre. They're like cult leaders. They'll come to me, these people. This is a bad idea.
Can I ask on another note, because I think it's a really interesting. What I'm interested in is that Cardboard Citizen stands for this amazing social change at its heart. Do you feel any tension between the socially progressive aims that you have and your artistic vision as a company? Do you ever feel that those two things are in tension?
No. In theory. Because if you do something right, so here's the thing. If the show is phenomenal and it hits one person in the heart, is that not social change? Like, does that not? I am, as an entity, as a person, an example of how art can create social change. See you later, Joey. Just getting upstage by little white dog.
See, he likes Boal, so he's mad.
There you go.
Yeah.
What was I saying? Yes. So I am like as a person, as a boy that grew up on a council estate in the middle of London, working class. Statistically, I should be either working in Tesco's, no shade, in prison, or working in the trade, like painting and decorating carpentry. And those things are very, very like worthy and like not prison, but you know, like, but those things are fine. But if it wasn't for art, if it wasn't for the engagement of art, I wouldn't be sitting here watching Joey go around and do all of that stuff. But I wouldn't be here, right? I wouldn't be engaged, and my life wouldn't. I would be a completely different person. And what I needed to do, and because I was lucky enough to grow up in a Labour government that was quite progressive when it came to arts and schooling, I did drama from year 7 and music from year 7, which is 11 years old. And as a young boy that wasn't particularly very good at anything, to all of a sudden discover music and drama and be able to go, you know what, I'm really fucking good at this. Happy days, and like it put me on this progression to here. I think that one person, that change, that one moment, because of the quality of the work or whatever, is the most important thing that we can do. And I think that if we sit here and two people have watched this play and think, do you know what, I want to go outside and do it, I want to go and change something, I want to go and do something right now, then fucking we've done it, smashed it, amazing. But that's, you know, that's only 2 people. However many people were in the room tonight, it's not going to, you're not going to hit 100% of people. You're also like, there is a strong likelihood that you've got a neo-Nazi in the audience. Do you know what I mean? Like, not like now, because you wouldn't be here.
None of you.
But like, there's always a probability that you're going to get somebody that absolutely doesn't agree, and you cement them into being like, do you know what? Fuck the homeless. You know, like you might. That is a possibility because people are people. You know, like if we talk about trying to solidify, like trying to understand homelessness as a thing, and we're going to represent homelessness on stage, that's kind of, it doesn't work because you're representing people. You have to represent one person. Like my partner works in teaches special needs, and like works with quite a lot of autistic people. And one of the things about autism, they say quite a lot of times, is if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I kind of feel like that about everybody. If you've met one person, you've met one person. Everybody has the capacity to be a dickhead, and everybody has the capacity to be a fucking saint. Those are all things that exist as a thing. So you can't represent. We get into this real trouble in the arts system. I'm going to rant. I'm ranting.
I love it.
But we get into real trouble when we start to like quantify different people. We start to like put them in little boxes because we have to, like for funding reasons or for audience reasons. We start talking about people that are 35 to 50 years old, they go to the National Theatre or whatever, and that's their demographic, and we know what they do. You don't know nothing about what they do as individuals. You just have this ideology that these group of people, because we put them into little boxes, are going to do something. And that sort of mindset is the same sort of mindset that says, you know what, people are worth not paying £80 extra per person for us to put this cladding on. Do you know what I mean? It's the same. It's the same thing. We're not treating people as people. Homeless people could love Miles Davis, and they could also like him. Do you know what I mean? Like those things could like. That doesn't mean that anybody's anybody. People are people, and we need to listen to people, because we're in this binary. Everybody has to be something, and I find that really difficult. And that does not answer your question in any way whatsoever. But I went on a rant. It really alienated my poor audience. Citizens. Joey walked around and did loads of stuff, and I just ranted at people and called somebody a neo-Nazi.
No, but Chris is an artistic director. Chris is an inspirational artistic leader because Chris is unapologetic, and that is, in my opinion, we need more of that.
See me tomorrow when I don't have a job.
I'd like to open up to any audience questions on the play, anything that's been raised, power of theatre for social change, represent, whatever it might be.
Firstly, I'm just thrilled, to be here. I think seeing live theatre again is one of the great delights of life. So I think it's fantastic that Represent are performing. It's been a hell of a journey. But I wondered whether or not there is more room in society for, should the government effectively encourage more philanthropy so that companies like Represent can continue to flourish. Is that the way forward?
Why are you suggesting philanthropy? Why is that your question?
Because I see it really as binary. I don't see that governments today, if they have the choice between a health service or theatre, they're going to go health. For rightly or wrongly, they're going to go health, because that's headlines. What they should be doing is taxing the very rich at such a level. Because the very rich, whether they have an extra 10 million or not, makes no difference. They're that rich, they can't spend it. So they might as well say, well, you know, there's 10 million for the theatre. Because if you don't do it voluntarily, at some stage, a government will take it.
I'm sorry, just so that I'm super clear. If you don't do what voluntarily, the government will take what?
Give.
Money.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying, because I just,
Yeah.
I feel like
I'm talking about funding theatre.
Yeah.
Or funding the arts in general.
So
Because if you take the United States, for example,
yeah.
philanthropy is tax deductible. That is why you see very wealthy people fund art galleries, museums, and what have you. In this country, it isn't. And I'm saying, tax the very rich, because they've already got enough, and an element of that goes to the arts. And you either do it voluntarily, or a government will come in and just say, bang, we're back into the 70s, anyone that earns more than X million, we're going to tax you at 98%, and they all bugger off to Hollywood. They all bugger off.
I'm so glad I asked the clarifier, because now I understand slightly more. And also, because I'm dual citizen English and American, so I often mix the two systems up, genuinely. And I don't think I knew that in this country, philanthropy, funding of the arts, as you say, is not tax deductible. I think I had assumed it was.
No.
And so when I hear philanthropy, how do I begin this statement? So I personally believe that the purpose of government is to know stuff I don't know and cannot know, because no one can be an expert in everything, but it's a big body of people who should know a lot of stuff. So they should be able to take my money and put it where it's useful. So when I think about philanthropy, I don't trust people with a lot of money to know how to spend their money either, because I don't know how to spend my money. I don't have a group of people telling me what's useful, neither do they. And there's also this fundamental, like, if you've grown up not wanting for anything, it takes active work to put yourself in a position where you understand the needs of people with less money than you. So in terms of like encouraging philanthropy, I'm like, no, encourage taxation, like tax me, and put it to stuff. But that was with the assumption that philanthropy was not just what you like to spend money on, might be the arts, or it might be this, or it might be that, and it's up to you to spend that money and you don't get a perk from it. I actually now feel like I'm somewhere in the middle about, like, yeah, it would be a good idea to give the tax break, like, make that a nicer deal. So I think it's quite hard for anyone to part with their money. So yeah, thank you for, I hope that didn't feel confrontational, but I was like, what are you saying?
No, I just genuinely believe, more than ever, you know, whether it be a legacy issue or not, that how much is enough? If you've got money, if you are wealthy, how much is enough? If you take the giant institutions, the giant corporations that are making 15 billion a quarter, what would it matter if they made 10 billion a quarter and you just took that extra 5 billion and said, you know what, we're going to pay the nurses a proper wage. We're going to pay the teachers a proper wage. And you know what? We're going to build 5 new theatres, and it's going to be for low socioeconomic actors, and it's going to be permanently funded from investment bank funds, because they make too much anyway.
I mean, I don't want to hold this conversation. I think I know the least about this issue of anyone on this stage. But I remember reading an interview of someone sometime in my life, I read someone saying that you get wings funded by people that have their names on it. Like the Dorfman was renamed within my sort of career. It was the Cottesloe, now it's the Dorfman. And like big people with expensive lives buy big expensive stuff. And this person was working at a hospital and they were talking about the opening of a new wing, and they were like, yeah, I just wish someone would want to put their name on the bedpans, because we really want bedpans, but no one wants to put their name on a bedpan. And I think stuff like this, stuff that Represent are doing, it's just not fucking big enough. The National Theatre, yeah, I'll rename your third big space that all the exciting work is in. Because that's big and shiny and very expensive. I am still shocked though that they don't get a tax break for doing that. That is shocking to me. So you've educated me a little bit.
And if you're watching Rufus Norris, we are interested in a transfer. This is a fascinating conversation, and I think carry on all night. We have another question from the audience over here.
Let me declare an interest. I first want to thank Andy, because Andy is the prime first mover for the existence of Represent, and I'm Guy's dad. I used to have a name, but I don't anymore. The only observation I wanted to make is that I'm suspicious of government funding anything, actually, because especially the arts, because we know it's not the priority of any government. And if they give it to you, I'm thinking of what John Clue's always said. If the government gives you money, you become dependent on it, and then they take it away. So I think some other mechanism, like Andy's vision, for getting the arts going is safer, more productive, more creative, and freer.
I think about that question raised another question in my head that I've thought about quite a lot recently, and it's kind of, can you have art, probably not as we know it, but can you have art without capitalism? Without the hierarchical structures and the power structures? A story like this, if everybody had a home, had shelter, had water, had all of the basics covered, a story like this wouldn't exist, maybe, wouldn't be necessary, wouldn't make you feel anything, wouldn't make you think, because it's not something that would happen if we were sort of in an ideal society, for want of a better word. And I have really wondered, like sort of over the last few months, like if we don't have something, that's always the question that's asked, that's sort of the Coq, what we're up against and what we as a collective are up against. And I've wondered, can you have the art and the struggle, which is often our sort of our story, can you have that without these structures of power? And yeah, like the reality of these power structures is horrible. I personally don't think anybody should have to go through such deep struggle. But is this sort of a necessary part of life? And this is sort of an extension of a question. It's not really an answer in that way. As you said that, I also thought of ancient Greece. The state used to fund the theatres and fund the actors and the stage makers. So that's always been in my mind ever since learning about that once upon a time, in ancient times, we were state funded. And does that have its own effect over how the stories are told? I don't know. A question.
Chris,
Don't ask the CEO. I have no idea. the question is, who is held accountable? And in many ways, theatre is meant to hold people accountable, regardless of what it is about. So it's meant to provocate. The problem with the system as is that if you are a charity as a theatre, you are then held to charity laws. That means that you can't be party political. So you can't outrightly hold the government accountable, and you can't play party politics, which is annoying because for many different reasons it's annoying. So what that means is that the plays have to then hold the people accountable, which it does actually quite a lot. So not all the time, but you know there are theatres, there are shows knocking about that are trying to hold people accountable. Sometimes they will have an audience of 10 people, and sometimes they will have an audience of 150 people. But maybe the 10 people are politicians. Like, you know, you never know who's going to be in the audience. So it's really important that you just keep telling those stories. Funding-wise, I have skepticism on both variables, because what I know from again being that statistically the working class artists that are sat on this stage or creative work and me aren't allowed. We weren't allowed to be here. Actually, if you look at the people, there was that lovely little moment in the 70s, sort of where people were funded to go to arts college, and then you ended up getting Timothy Spall and Gary Oldman and all of those people. It was a lovely little tiny moment, but not so lovely really. That sort of happens because people could be creative. But what will happen is if somebody comes in, if Billy Big Bollocks comes in and says, I'm going to give you 10 million, right? And you'll go, oh, right, brilliant. He goes, but the thing is that Jimmy Big Bollocks, he's got a play. And I really like this play, and I think it's a really good play, and I think maybe you should put this play on. Then you've got a decision to make. Do I take that 10 million and put Jimmy's? And then am I held hostage? Because power corrupts always, right? So people sometimes do have nefarious ideologies. So you need, I don't see it being binary and being like one thing or the other thing. I think it just be everything. All money is good for the arts, regardless of where it comes from. But as long as you're interrogating it, and as long as you have morals and you can stand up for certain things, you know. And I mean, obviously, don't take money from somebody that denies the Holocaust or something. You know what I mean? Or don't take money from somebody that has perpetuated the medicine crisis in America, which has been the case on a couple of times. God, I'm pissing people off today. But the point is that you have to find your morals, and as you as a person that is in charge of an organisation, and you're in charge of an organisation. You're in charge of an organisation. And you're an artist.
I'm not in charge of anything.
You're in charge of but in many ways you are your own organisation because you are creating the work for yourself.
I'm in charge of the play, that's it. Yeah.
We have to find where our moral line is. My moral line is quite solid, but I think that comes from privilege. Do you know, like in many different ways. I am a white heterosexual man. Like, regardless of being working class, I have a privilege that these two brilliant human beings do not have. So I need to absolutely make sure that my morals are like on the level. But that means that when you're really trying to get ahead and somebody comes in and says, here's $1 million, but I really don't want to employ whoever demographic, do you take it? But you want to get ahead, and then that's when it becomes really murky. I'm also quite successful to this point, do you know what I mean? So that I can actually say fuck off to things I don't want to necessarily do. And not successful like necessarily monetary, but like I have a reputation, I suppose, and that reputation means that I get to call shit out. Not all the time though. There's loads of stuff that I don't call out. I should, but I can't, Well,
this is partly what the play is about. Like there's a line in it where she says, I'm vegetarian when I can, which is like obviously a joke, and a lot of people laugh at it, but it's really not a joke. Like, who can afford to have ethics, morals, ways, who has control over how they live their life and what help they accept? So it doesn't, I think, this question is a question for everyone, not just if you're in control of an organisation, not just if you are writing a play, not just if you are in every interaction. It's a universal thing we should be considering, in my opinion.
And it's always changing as well, because we no longer live in a binary, or as binary as we thought it was, especially with questions of marginalised groups, and gender is a huge question for everyone now, and we have to embrace what seems like it's come from a younger generation, but actually the binary of gender itself is pre-colonial in many, many countries across the world. And so that consideration in itself, when we kind of deconstruct what we believe to be the standards, or the modern standards of a Western society, actually nothing is binary and absolute. It's no longer man woman. It's no longer one or the other. There's, like you said, everything's on a spectrum now. When we're talking about diversity, whether that's being black or white or neurodiverse, and all of these different capabilities that we have to consider. You spoke to Paralympians who, the majority of, from what you said people don't ask us the same questions that they ask able-bodied people. And actually in our group as Represent Theatre, as people, we're a very diverse group of people, cast and crew. Got people who are hard of hearing in the space, which means that as able-bodied people, we have to stretch ourselves to best communicate, to best get our intention, our meaning, and our language across. So we actually have to, or it's important for us to always consider our morals and how they're changing, and how we're standing in relation to others. Always, I think it's like an ever going. It's an everlasting conversation. I think that's the word. That's not really the word. There's a word for it. It's a continuing conversation.
I think we got what you said. You know what I mean? But you know, that's the thing, is that we're interrogating all the time. We do this in the group. You saying, talking about how lucky you were to have Isley in the room. You were very lucky. But also, isn't it great to just be like, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you saying is? Like, and theatre, it should be that. Like, it should always be an interrogation, and we should be interrogating our morals and the funding situation, who we're employing. All of those things need to be interrogated consistently, because life changes, the world changes. You're still very well trying to make a utopia, and what if you make that utopia and you don't keep an eye on it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What if that utopia turns into an awful place for somebody?
Well, revolution isn't something that happens once and then it's done.
Yeah.
It's
It
like
doesn't
you do
solve
it
it, does it?
every day, and it's so tiring, but it's so essential. Yeah, it's ongoing.
Speaking of doing it every day, Loussin-Torah is by day rehearsing Interruptions, which is our next play. So you should get some sleep. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists, Chris, Isley, and Loussin-Torah. And thank you so much for coming.